The velvet rope snapped shut 1 inch from her wrist, the brass latch clicking like a small verdict that wanted to sound bigger than it was. People in linen and quiet watches glanced up the way city birds do when a shadow crosses them, not afraid, only curious whether the shadow is worth a story later. Not this line, the gate agent said into a smile that came from training and not from soul. The microphone on her collar picked up every syllable and set it into the air between first class and everyone else. The sign above read boarding group A, but the way the agent held her palm out said the letter had been replaced by a face. The woman in front of the rope didn't bristle. She had learned a long time ago that bristling wasted energy she might need for the part after the part people record. She pressed her ticket flat against the counter with 2 fingers. Embossed edges caught the terminal light. Cabin 1001. First class. Paid in full 10 weeks ago at 7:14 a.m., because she wakes early and finishes what she starts. Please direct me to the written policy that makes group a conditional on my arrival looking like this, she said, voice low enough to calm a skittish horse and clear enough to cut cloth. She did not say my skin. The sign and the smile had already said it for her. Behind her, someone cleared a throat, the international sound for I don't want trouble, I only want a vacation to remain a vacation. A couple drifted past the rope on a tide of apology. So sorry, the man murmured, meaning for existing inside the correct category. They smelled like bergamot and new money. A bellman angled a silver bucket of champagne between elbows and cameras. Phones rose. The first lens always rises like a scout, the rest march after, emboldened. The manager arrived in a suit that had seen more meetings than weather. He had the kind of jaw that loves instructions. Ma'am, he began with the practiced cadence of a policy manual, for your comfort, she held up her palm and he paused, surprised into honesty. For my comfort, she asked. Or yours? His eyes flicked to the agent, to the line, to the glass door beyond which a wide carpet led to a staircase wrapped in brass like a promise. Somewhere, beneath the whir of escalators and the hum of refrigerated air, the ocean exhaled. It has never cared about lines. It only recognizes balance and fall. A child in a sun hat tugged at a mother's sleeve. Why can't the lady go? Loud enough to register, innocent enough to make the people who call themselves good feel a small stone prickle inside their shoe. The mother didn't answer. She looked at the mother's mouth instead and watched a century practice silence. The manager smiled again, careful. First class has capacity limits. We can offer a complimentary upgrade to a premium cabin in our other wing. Coach, the agent said, too quickly, then blinked as training in her ear corrected the word. People noticed. She noticed who noticed. She noticed the name on the manager's badge, the time above the gate, the red light on the camera dome, and the shadow of a uniformed security officer moving closer in the glass's reflection. She folded each detail the way her grandmother used to fold linens, not to hide them, but to keep them ready. I'll need your refusal in writing, she said. With your name and the specific policy cited. She slid her phone across the counter with the voice memo already recording and a blank document open. His jaw moved because the instruction inside him didn't have a line for this line. We can't, he started. Then you won't, she said. The agent's fingers tapped the desk, small nails counting out a prayer, let this pass, let lunch be on time, let the deck be windy and the sunset be nice. A couple in matching hats approached the rope. We're Group A, they said, and without asking for proof the agent unlatched the brass and let them through, the rope kissing their hips as they passed like a velvet benediction. The woman watched the brief parting and understood that policy here was not a rule but a mood. The ocean exhaled again. It had moved ships in years. It could move this. Security will assist you, the manager said. And the officer's steps slowed, because even officers learn to recognize a certain arrangement of shoulders and phone and witnesses that promise their name will end up in places beyond their pay grade. You will not lay hands on me, she said, not loud. The officer stopped 2 paces away and found something very important to adjust on his sleeve. Her phone buzzed against her palm like a small animal wanting freedom. She answered without turning. Hey, she said. The voice at the other end was sun-warmed steel. Is this the part where you want me to be polite? He asked, or the part where you want them to learn? It's the part, she said, where I do the first thing first. She hung up. People will tell you power is a phone call. Sometimes power is choosing the order of the calls. The manager tried a different door. We're happy to have you on board, he said, letting the words rest on the floor where the rope wasn't. Just not in that section, the agent added, and went pale a little when she heard herself. The mother in the sun hat coughed, and it sounded like the beginning of an apology she would tell herself later at dinner she had made. You don't have to be sorry for me, the woman said to no one in particular and to the room as a body. Be sorry for your policies when they meet sunlight. She then angled her face toward the ceiling camera so that the record would recognize her as a person and not a shape. She spoke the date, the port, the ship's name, the time stamp, the names on the badges, the exact words, guests like you. The agent's fingers stopped tapping. In the corner of her eye, she saw the brass staircase again. It curved up like a question mark. She had climbed harder shapes. The security officer coughed. The ocean exhaled. A gull stitched a quick white thread across the glass wall and was gone. Last call for first-class boarding, the PA sang, cheerful as a host who knows only one song. Group A, please proceed. The rope stayed latched. A woman in a navy blazer with a clipboard appeared, flanked by someone who wore the uniform of the Port Authority and an expression that lives in the part of the face that doesn't have muscles. The clipboard woman began to speak the language of policy to the man who loved instructions, and he loved it the way a drowning man loves rain. The port officer stood beside the rope and regarded it as if it were a child who had drawn on a wall and needed to be told gently that the wall belongs to more people than the child. Ma'am, the clipboard said, do you have documentation? The woman slid the ticket over. Paid in full, the clipboard read, and you could feel the room exhale a little because money still makes people polite even when dignity does not. Then what seems to be the clipboard began, and the agent said softly, we were following our usual, and then stopped, because the word usual had never looked uglier on her mouth. The man in the suit saw, in the reflection of the glass, the small red eye of the camera and the gathering of phones and the child looking at him and the woman not moving, not pleading, not performing anything for him but patience. He saw a rope that wished it had the day off. He saw his training kneel before a rule it had called preference. He saw, for a brief, nearly human second, the future, and in it he was writing an email that began with "We regret." Please step aside, he said. We'll resolve this. It was not an apology. It was a weather report. She stepped aside, but not away. Resolve it on paper, she said. Resolve it with your name. The clipboard wrote, the port officer watched, the agent found the part of the desk where there was no dust and rubbed it with the ball of her thumb as if the wood might deliver her from her own choices. The brass latch still held, the rope still touched air where it could have touched nothing. The couple who had slipped through earlier looked down from the top of the staircase with a gaze that could not find a place to rest in decency and landed instead in the soft cushion of relief. The ocean exhaled one more time, and this time it sounded like a clock. Boarding closes in 2 minutes, the PA said. The child with the sun hat tugged again. Is she going to miss the boat? He asked. We don't miss boats, the woman said, and she meant more than the vessel docked outside. She meant funerals and graduations and checks due and chances handed to other people with worse timing and better faces. She meant history with its yellowed fingers pushing her shoulder and her mother's voice saying, baby, keep your back straight. She meant yes. She meant everything that wasn't the rope. Put the refusal on your letterhead, she said to the manager, with your policy, and your name, and today's date. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. Give us a moment, he said, and the clipboard nodded, and the port officer's jaw moved once in what a different century would have called agreement. Phones hovered. The camera's red light stayed red. The ocean reached for the hull and withdrew, polite as a butler who knows his worth. A gull stitched another white thread across the window, like a signature at the bottom of a page that had not yet been written. And in the split second before anything else could happen, in that tight quiet where beginnings put on their shoes, the woman smiled, very slightly, the way a chess player does when she recognizes the exact position from a book she has read too many times to forget. She had asked for the paper. Now she was going to get the pen. They seated her in a side alcove dressed up as courtesy, a low white chair, a square of glass masquerading as a table, a carafe with slices of lime performing freshness on a morning that tasted more like metal. Courtesy often arrives with good lighting. She turned the chair to face the gate so the rope remained in view, because witnesses are anchors and the mind at war with itself will drift if it loses sight of the thing it is naming. The clipboard returned with a single sheet that wore the company's crest like perfume. Acknowledgement of reassignment, it read in gentle font, to ensure guest comfort and operational efficiency. The words did the same work as the rope and the smile, but quieter. This is not a refusal, the clipboard said. It is a courtesy adjustment. She flattened the paper with the back of a fingernail, smoothing it as if it were linen that would sit upon a good table, smoothed it so gently that no one could later say she had crumpled it in anger and caused its lines to be illegible. You are reassigning me from first class, she said, against my paid booking, due to operational efficiency. At the exact moment a non-black couple, arriving later, was escorted to a suite in my group, without their documents checked. Her voice didn't rise, the room's temperature did. Somewhere inside the agent's ear, a supervisor's breath could be heard, say nothing, do less. Ma'am, we do not record that kind of information, the clipboard tried, loving policy like some people love proverbs because both save you the work of thinking. She lifted her phone. Then accept my recording of this kind of information, she said, and place your signature beneath it. I will attach the timestamp and names. The clipboard hesitated. Papers are brave until pens approach them. You can watch courage blister. A hesitation is a bruise before it colors. Out at the rope, Group A continued to trickle. A man with a pink polo and the bounce of inherited certainty joked to his friend about the hold-up, and the friend, to his credit, glanced our way and said, "It's not a hold-up. It's a hold-out," which is the kind of sentence that sounds like a pun and turns out to be a map. The security officer adjusted his sleeve for the third time, then found, on the floor beneath the captain's smiling poster, an invisible spot that demanded urgent attention until supervisors finished deciding which direction to face the future. Her phone lit with a message, "On my way, 5 minutes." It was signed with no name, because some names are too familiar to need ink. She typed back, "Wait. Let me finish the first thing first." He responded with a single period, which in their shared language meant yes, execute. The clipboard bent, physically and metaphorically. "We can escalate to a guest relations manager," she offered. And the phrase sounded like those little wooden bridges in city parks that cross nothing but are picturesque in photos. "Do that," she said, "and bring paper with his name printed on it. And while you walk, print me a copy of your non-discrimination statement, the one you frame near the concierge, and your internal policy on passenger reassignments by Comfort." The clipboard wrote the words down. It mimicked thought because thought had failed it. In the chair opposite her sat the mother in the sun hat. The hat was now in her lap, clutched like something that needed assurance itself. "My son's never seen the sea," the mother said, almost apologetically, as if the sea belonged to certain families more than others. "He drew the ship for a month." She nodded. "He will see it. And he will also see this. And then he will know the truth of his own eyes when someone tries to sell him a softer version later." The mother nodded, but not with her neck. She nodded with the part of her that writes the story she will tell her friends at home and decides whether to leave out the part where she didn't say anything when she could have. The guest relations manager came dressed in that refined penmanship of luxury, breast pocket that knows linen, tie that knows restraint, aftershave that collapses distance. He introduced himself with 2 names and a title that sounded as if it had been translated into English from the language of smooth stones. "Let's step to a private lounge," he suggested. "No," she said. "Let's keep our conversation where your rope can hear it." He smiled with the corner of his mouth that belongs to strategic clients. The other corner stayed out of office. He placed a folder on the glass. "An upgrade to a sky deck suite in our alternate wing," he said. She placed her ticket on top of his folder. "This is the suite I purchased," she said. "Your upgrade is a downgrade dressed for cocktails." He inhaled, exhaled, his breath smelled like mint that had been told to behave. "Operationally," he began, "we aim to balance. Your balance currently rests on my shoulders," she said, and the people nearest felt the sentence like a temperature change. He tried a new door. We can offer a spa package, dining credits, a private tour of the bridge. It was an odd list: touch, food, power. I require a boarding pass to the cabin on my contract, she said. And I require your written acknowledgement that you denied me that pass until now with the following rationale. She slid across a second prepared document she had typed while the clipboard was fetching its courage: 3 blank lines for names, a blank for time, a blank for cited policy, a blank for stated reason, a blank for other notes, and a signature line. She had created this template after the 3rd time in her life that a civilized room tried to teach her that a smile was an answer. He read the template the way a man reads a language he used to speak better. "I'll need authorization," he said. "You have it," she replied, and she didn't mean from his superior. She meant from the crowd and the camera and the way the ocean makes liars out of small ships. But authorization doesn't translate across management charts. He gestured for the clipboard. "Print our guest charter," he said. The clipboard ran, literally ran, because printing a charter is the easiest work policy can do when policy is asked to be a person. At the rope, the last trickle of Group A passed. A young crewman with a shy mustache looked at her and then at the staircase and then at her and then at the staircase, and his body performed an indecision he would dream about in 10 years when his daughter asks him what kind of man he used to be. The PA announced, "Final call for first class," and the words landed in the room like the end of a song in a church that refuses to leave because the spirit hasn't finished yet. A man in a navy blazer without clipboard but with jurisdiction entered from the port side, epaulets saying officer, posture saying judge. He didn't smile. He did the difficult, unfashionable work of introducing himself plainly, with title and ID number for the record, because plainness preserves dignity when dignity is being tested. "We have received a complaint," he said. "We will resolve boarding now, and we will document the antecedents." The guest relations manager relaxed the way a man does when a lifeguard reaches the edge of the pool. Relief often confuses rescue with absolution. "Before you resolve," she said, "please ask your team to repeat their stated reason for reassignment, into my phone, for accuracy, then sign this description." The officer looked at her, at the phone, at the gathered eyes. He nodded. He had met the world. It had not always been kind to him. He had learned that kindness and courage are cousins who occasionally wear each other's jackets. The agent swallowed. "For guest comfort," she said, voice small enough to fit inside a glove. "Which guest?" the officer asked. "I was informed." The agent glanced at the manager, and in that glance you could see 10 corporate emails walking arm in arm away from accountability. The manager cleared his throat. "We do not disclose internal," he stopped. The officer's eyebrows made a small, grave bridge. "Sign the description," the officer said. He did not raise his voice. Most doors open for calm. She slid the pen across. It was a plain pen, the kind they keep by the tip jar. He took it like it might stain. He signed his name below the sentence that will live in her files and in her lawyer's files and in the Port Authority's folder under today, a record. The agent signed hers beneath it, hands shaking a little, not from fear of her, but from fear of the future that had just acquired a paper trail. "Now," the officer said, "issue the proper boarding pass." The guest relations manager took out a keyboard smile and typed with the swiftness of a man who prides himself on manual competence when the high-level skill has failed him. The printer spat a rectangle that glowed slightly when tilted. The manager held it out. She did not take it. "Place it on the paper," she said, and when he did, the image looked like a photograph of justice, a contract lying atop a confession, and a ticket shining from above like a belief that just found its feet. She took a picture. The camera made that crisp shutter sound that phones still make to comfort our memory that proof must be audible. She then slid the ticket into the sleeve beneath her original confirmation and pressed them together, as if marrying them in a ceremony a city clerk would approve. "Escort the guest," the officer told a junior staffer, the one with the shy mustache, whose posture adjusted upright the way a young tree learns to accept a stake. "Before I go," she said, "I request one more thing." The room prepared itself for vengeance. People are disappointing that way. We love justice when it looks like a movie. It rarely does. Post your non-discrimination statement by the rope, she said, and keep a copy at the desk. If you continue your comfort policy in daylight, at least you'll teach your children the words they're building with. The officer blinked. The manager looked like a man who had been handed a map to a city he had lived in for years and never seen streets labeled. The junior staffer gestured toward the staircase. She stood. People open their mouths when they stand from a fight, the body likes to release sound then, even if the mouth doesn't use words. She used none. She smoothed the front of her dress like she was erasing chalk from an old lesson on a board large enough for a whole room to learn. The mother in the sun hat put the hat back on and adjusted it and whispered, "I'm sorry," and the woman shook her head, almost smiling, to say you don't owe me that. You owe it to the next you see. Halfway to the rope unlatched itself via the hand of the agent, who had discovered she was able to perform this function without permission. It swung away like something forgiven. The staircase waited. Brass curved upward, the kind of curve painters love because it catches light in 3 different ways at once. She placed a foot on the first step and the room experienced a small moment of correction, like a compass needle finding north after a magnet is removed. At the second step, her phone buzzed again. A single message, at the curb. "Do you still want it quiet?" She paused. Quiet had done its work. Quiet had gotten a pen to paper and a ticket to a palm. But Quiet had not taught the building. She typed back, "No. Teach the building." He responded with nothing, because sometimes the answer is not a word but an engine. The staircase lifted her toward glass and carpet and the part of the ship that sells the idea of the ship better than the ship does. At the landing, she stopped and turned, not to gloat, not to gather applause, but to collect the memory of the rope, the desk, the agent, the officer, the manager, the mother, the child, the junior staffer who set his shoulders just then as if remembering a promise he hadn't made yet. "See you at muster," she said softly, and it sounded like a blessing spoken in a language the room used to know. She stepped onto the mezzanine. 2 crew members in immaculate whites approached to guide her onward, faces arranged into that neutral, gracious blank that says welcome without choosing sides. The ocean touched the hull again, this time with a sound like a hand pressed to a chest. Outside the glass, the curb flashed the briefest glint of black paint and chrome and the kind of presence that doesn't announce itself because it never has to. She did not hurry. She had changed the order of the calls. Now the second call was about to change the order of the room. A single horn note from the curb cut through the terminal air, soft, not loud, the kind of sound that doesn't demand attention so much as rearrange it. Faces near the gangway tilted toward the glass as a long black line and a slip of chrome stitched past like a lightning bolt deciding to take its time. She was already on the mezzanine landing, boarding pass warm in her palm, the signed refusal beneath it like a confession pinned to a uniform. Paper had done its job, it had turned story into record. But records are foundations, not roofs. Hook, the room thinks the scene is over, the room is wrong. Something shifted at the rope, the subtle compression that happens when 10 people realize a new center of gravity has entered the room. A man in a pale jacket, not a captain, not a cop, not labeled at all, stepped through the doors with 2 others, a woman carrying a leather folio and a second man with the stillness lawyers use when silence is their exhibit. They did not rush, they did not dawdle. They moved like clocks that other clocks consult. The first-class manager elongated himself by an inch and produced a smile better suited to yesterday. He said the woman's name as if tasting, finally, that every letter had an address where consequences could be delivered. The man in the pale jacket didn't introduce himself, theatrics waste time when everyone in the room will know the name in 5 minutes anyway. He looked up to the landing where she stood, warmth crossed steel on his face, the face he reserves for kitchens, not boardrooms. She dipped her chin, their old code for, "I finish the first thing, do the next thing." "Where is your terminal lead?" the folio woman asked. Her voice held no anger, only sequence. The manager pointed at the glass office. "Good," she said. "Begin with what requires no debate, your passenger bill of rights. It's on your website. Print it. Post it by the rope." The agent, the one who said, "Comfort," reached for the printer before she realized she'd moved. Hook, policy in daylight is a mirror, some mirrors refuse to be decorative. Also, the folio woman continued, fetch the written protocol for operational reassignments that mentions guest comfort, and attach the signed statement you just provided this passenger. The manager blinked the way people do when paperwork grows a second head. Now, the man in the pale jacket added, turning to the port officer, we'll keep boarding moving. But we'll document antecedents. Comm makes doors open. Phones rose higher, someone whispered, who is he, with the reverence people once reserved for bishops. He ignored the question the way the ocean ignores fences. He was not there to be recognized. He was there to be followed. The junior crewman with the shy mustache straightened his spine like a sapling remembering it has a stake. The port officer, solid as a dock, stepped closer. Issue the proper pass, he told the manager. Then meet me in the office with your logs. The printer gasped, spit a rectangle, and the manager held it out with two hands like a ceremonial bowl. She did not take it until he set it on the paper that named what he'd done. The camera above clicked in the mind like a shutter that needed no sound. Hook, the proof isn't the signature, it's the sequence. Ma'am, the pale jacket said to her, voice low, would you prefer quiet? She studied the room, rope, faces, phones, the mother in the sun hat, the child who had asked why the lady couldn't go, the agent rubbing a spotless corner of desk, the junior crewman mapping a future onto his posture. Quiet had fixed the facts. Quiet hadn't taught the building. No, she said. Teach the building. He nodded and sent a text he could have sent from the car but didn't, because timing is rhetoric. Glass doors parted again. Two more people entered from the curb with the purposeful anonymity of those who do consequential work for a living, a PR lead clutching a thin laptop like a scalpel, and a compliance director whose face wore the geometry of audits. The manager's smile frayed at the edges the way fabric does when a weight it never planned to carry sits on it anyway. Here is your live statement, the PR lead said, handing the manager a printed paragraph with blanks for names and times. You will read it by the rope after we post the charter. He began to stammer something about internal approvals. The compliance director placed a finger gently on the page. The approval is him, she said, tipping her head toward the pale jacket. The manager's eyes did that quick arithmetic that adds up salaries and subtracts courage, then landed on 0. The folio woman pinned the charter to a stand beside the brass latch, eyes scanning for level the way a carpenter's spirit level would. The words were plain: non-discrimination, equal service, complaint channels, enforcement. The crowd read with the concentration of church mothers reading a program, lips moving, small nods, side eyes that promised someone would tell if the numbers lied later. Hook, policy posted in public isn't theater, it's a receipt. Ladies and gentlemen, the manager began at the rope, voice pitched to Carrie, we regret and accept responsibility for a boarding process today that did not honor our charter. Effective immediately, he stopped as if he'd reached the edge of a deck and discovered ocean where he expected floor. The PR lead tapped the line. Effective immediately, reassignment protocols are suspended pending audit. All staff will receive additional training developed with community partners. If you believe you have been treated unfairly, please, the line finished itself under his tongue. The mother in the sun had exhaled the way people do when they've been holding their breath so long they forget air is allowed. The child stared up at the charter and traced a line of text with his finger, an instinct older than literacy. The junior crewman moved to the staircase and, without being told, unlatched the rope and held it like a man escorting a bride down an aisle he cannot afford but can respect. The agent looked at her hands and discovered they can do this motion without permission. Proceed to first class, the port officer said to her, and this time the sentence sounded less like clearance and more like correction. She stepped, and the rope obeyed. A ripple of applause started in the back, the uncertain kind that looks for permission, then gathered confidence as it moved forward. She didn't turn to collect it. Applause is not currency. It's weather. She took the staircase like a woman who had been promised sky and decided to measure it herself. At the landing, she paused. On the glass above the curb, the reflection of the pale jacket caught up to her. Beside him, the compliance director conferred with the port officer. The PR lead adjusted a camera angle so the charter filled the frame. The manager's shoulders sagged in that human way that sometimes precedes repentance and sometimes merely signals fatigue. She couldn't read which yet. Not her job. Hook, Justice is not a mood, it is minutes, names, and paper. She turned toward the corridor that led into the first-class lounge, carpet thick enough to erase footfalls, lighting designed to flatter faces that already receive enough flattery. An attendant in immaculate white smiled with practiced grace, but the grace looked less practiced today, as if kindness had borrowed authenticity for the afternoon. "Welcome," he said, and the word did not feel like a password anymore. It felt like a definition being corrected in a dictionary. Her phone buzzed once. A message, media in 10. Your call. She looked over the rail to the rope, to the charter, to the boy in the sun hat sounding out a word with his mouth. Let them in, she typed back. But keep the camera on the charter, not me. He replied with nothing, which in their language meant affirmed. The ocean kissed the hull, a gentle, indisputable punctuation mark, and withdrew. Somewhere, a gull drew a white line across blue and left no dent because some signatures need only to be seen, not carved. She slid the boarding pass back into its sleeve and let her hand rest on it a second longer than necessary. Paper, camera, rope, faces, horn, glass, charter. Sequence complete. The lounge door opened on its silent hinge. She stepped through, not to enter a rarefied air, but to make sure the next pair of lungs that wanted it wouldn't need a witness to earn it. Behind her, at the rope, the manager began again, voice steadier, reading the words that would live online by nightfall and in the break room by morning. The building had been taught. The lesson would need repeating. Lessons always do. Hook, the ship hasn't sailed yet, and already the tide has turned. The first-class lounge had that hush money can buy, carpet that swallows footfalls, lighting warm enough to look like forgiveness, glass so clean it refuses to be seen. She didn't sit. Sitting would have told her body the story was over, and her body knows better. Down below, the rope had become decor around a posted charter, and the man in the pale jacket was turning management into verbs: print, sign, post, apologize, instead of nouns. The ocean pressed its palm to the hull and withdrew, as if to say, I approve of sequences. Miss Cole, the attendant said softly, he'd read the name from the boarding pass still in her hand, can I take your bag? You can walk with me, she said, and his face did that little relief people do when you offer them dignity they weren't sure they deserved. He fell in beside her, a measured step behind, the way a person walks with someone who is not above them but ahead. At the lounge desk, a host with immaculate posture tried a practiced line. We trust your experience with us from here will be impeccable. It will be documented, she said, and the host blinked, a small bow in the direction of reality. Would you like still or sparkling? Water that doesn't pretend to be anything else, she replied. The host poured from a clear carafe and, without being told, set a second glass beside it for the attendant. Hook stack, small corrections teach better than speeches, everyone in earshot felt the room tilt toward a new normal. Through the glass, the mezzanine framed the rope like a stage. The manager, flanked by compliance and port authority, was reading the statement for the second time, slower, as if trying on the shape of each word against the inside of his teeth. Effective immediately, he said, we have suspended reassignment by comfort, pending external audit, we are implementing visible passenger rights signage at boarding points, and we are establishing a dedicated channel for complaints monitored by an independent partner. He didn't name the independent partner yet because the contract would be signed tomorrow. But promises spoken in front of witnesses tend to bind ink later. Her phone thumped softly with messages. Strangers from the terminal had found her public account and were sending what passes for prayer online, some with fire emojis, some with paragraphs, a few with the only words that matter after a public attempt at dignity, I saw. I'm sorry. I won't forget. She thumbed back 3 replies, thank you, thank you, thank you, because courtesy, when voluntary, is not the same as theater when required. Media in position, her partner texted. Do you want a statement, or do you want the paper to speak? She thought of the child in the sun hat tracing the charter with his finger. The paper, she sent. But let the mother talk if she wants. And the junior crewman. A beat. Copy, he wrote. This is what power looks like when it's housebroken, it listens to the person who took the first hit. The folio woman appeared at the lounge entrance with the port officer, both moving with that precise calm that tells rooms what time it is. We'll need 5 minutes of yours, she said. We're compiling a contemporaneous record, your account, the sequence, names, and the remedies offered. She nodded. On the record, she said. No off-ramps. They took seats at a small table that looked designed for champagne commitments, not testimonies. Today it would do both. The compliance director opened a form that knew where to put nouns. The port officer placed his ID beside his pen like a seal. Begin at the rope, the compliance director said. She recited the specifics, the phrase, not this line, the later couple waved through without document check, the phrase, guests like you, the offer of comfort in the other wing, the signed description of refusal, the time stamps, the names, the camera domes blink. As she spoke, something shifted in the officer's posture, an imperceptible easing, the relaxation of a man who recognizes language tight enough to hold in court. Hooks, the scene breathes because the sentences do what doors do, open, close, lock. Remedies offered, the compliance director prompted. Spa, dining credit, bridge tour, she said. All excellent bandages for a wound they did not treat. The compliance director's mouth made the ghost of a smile. Remedies accepted. Boarding pass to the cabin I paid for, she said, placing it on the table a heartbeat, then returning it to her palm like a talisman. Plus, visible charter by the rope. Plus, audit. Plus, training with community partners. Plus, a complaint channel outside their building. Noted, the director said, voice neutral in that way expensive neutrality is. Down below, the PR lead had angled cameras so the charter filled half the frame and the managers faced the other half, forcing the algorithm to reckon with text instead of merely complexion. The mother in the sun hat stood behind the tape, not as prop but as person, and when a microphone wandered near, she spoke without coaching. I didn't say anything at first, she said, voice trembling, because vacations make cowards. I won't do that again. The clip would travel farther than the apology. Security complaint? The port officer asked. Hands were not laid on me, she said. The officer approached and stopped when instructed. Record that restraint. He did, pen making a small affirmative scratch. Not all accountability is punishment, sometimes it is praise to teach the right muscle what it feels like when it's used correctly. Would you like to press for individual discipline now? The compliance director asked, pragmatic. No, she said. Document the facts. Let the audit set the table. People eat what they serve themselves later. The director nodded, she prefers appetites over scapegoats, cleaner outcomes. Hooks, graceful restraint increases weight, the audience leans in because vengeance did not arrive on schedule. A steward drifted near the table, hesitated, then spoke. My sister lives with how they look at her, he said, staring at the carpet's pattern. Today felt different. She looked up at him. Make sure tomorrow does, she said. He nodded, shoulders squaring. Witnesses turn into workers when given verbs. Her partner appeared at the lounge door then, not inside so much as at the threshold, respect as choreography. He lifted a hand. She mirrored it. In their private liturgy, that meant status, together. He didn't cross because today wasn't about rescuing. Today was about teaching paper to work in public. Still, even teachers eat. You'll be late for lunch, he mouthed. I've been late for worse, she mouthed back, and the small grin that cracked his composure told the room what kind of marriage folds big moments into ordinary jokes. The compliance director finished the form, read it back to her in crisp syllables, then slid it across for signature. The port officer added his own attestations, time-stamped, initials squared. She signed, the way a person signs without flourish, legible, full name, no initials, because abbreviated identities are a privilege, not a right. Copy to you by email now, the director said, tapping the tablet. Her phone buzzed with the PDF, that quietened song of closure that isn't quite closure. Anything you want added? The officer asked. She glanced down at the lounge's brochure array, the glossy landscapes, the lists of superlatives, the price tags written as if embarrassment were a font. Yes, she said. Add this, guest requested that future apologies be read at the rope, not whispered in lounges. The director looked at her a second, then typed, not sighing. The best professionals don't sigh when someone asks for something better. The PA chimed with the cheerful tyranny of schedule. All aboard, it sang. The steward gestured toward the forward corridor. We'll take you through the library, he said, quieter this way. No, she said, standing. Take me past the rope. He hesitated. Of course. Hook, she is not done telling the room who it is. They walked back to the mezzanine rail. She could see the mother now talking to the boy, his hand still on the charter, explaining that words on walls matter because doors forget. The junior crewman held the rope loose, a small invitation. The manager had finished the second reading. He looked up and met her eyes for the first time in a way that recognized a person and not a problem. He opened his mouth, she shook her head a fraction. Not here. Not me. Read it again tomorrow. She descended the last steps with the kind of calm that makes other people stand straighter. As she passed the rope, the agent who'd said, "Comfort," said, barely audible, "I'm sorry." She didn't stop, she had a ship to catch and a sunset she had already put on hold, but she touched the posted charter with 2 fingers, a secular mezuzah, and said, "Be," to the paper, because sometimes the holiest thing you can tell a promise is to exist. The gangway took her, the hull swallowed echoes, and the ship's atrium opened like a throat ready to sing. A string quartet rehearsed a song Money Loves. It sounded different, like the key had been raised half a step to make the high note possible for the person who hadn't known she could reach it. She turned toward her suite on deck 10 and walked as if it were simply the next room in a house she paid for, because it was. Behind her, near the rope, the PR lead gave one final instruction: keep the charter up through disembarkation. We always do, the manager lied. Now you will, she said, not unkind. The ocean placed another palm against steel. The building had learned a sentence. Tomorrow it would need a paragraph. Lessons repeat until they stick. The horn sounded once, permission granted, yes, but also promise claimed. The tide was ready. So was she. The ship eased off the pier like a cathedral deciding to float, brass railings catching a late beam of sun and throwing it back in little squares across the atrium floor. She could have shut the door of Suite 1001 and let the world be smaller for an hour, the robe on its hook, the bowl of cold fruit sugar bright, the bed ironed into a horizon, but closing the door would have lied to her nerves. She left it ajar, set the boarding pass on the desk beside the signed refusal, and wrote the day's date on a hotel note card as if opening a file in a cabinet the future will need. A chime announced muster drill, the ship's public voice demonstrated calm the way a pianist demonstrates scales. She took the forward stairs instead of the guest elevator and let the climb do what climbs do, turn breath into metronome and anger into instrument. At the muster station, orange vests waited in neat stacks like the last honest sentence in a contract. Families collected themselves into little countries. A crewwoman with a clipboard ticked names and found hers quickly, relief showing in the place on her cheek where stress usually lives. Welcome, she said, not as branding but as breath. Across the promenade, she saw the junior crewman with the shy mustache handing a vest to the mother in the sun hat. The boy slipped his arms into orange with ceremonial care, then looked up and found her watching. He lifted his chin, a small nod that children give to secret allies. She returned it. There are nods that draft people. He had just been conscripted into a kinder army. The ship let go of the city, the skyline shivered, then settled into distance, and with motion came appetite. She skipped the private canopy reception, too many apologies disguised as shrimp, and found a table at the edge of the first-class lounge where she could watch the sea slide by like a long paragraph written without a period. The attendant from earlier appeared with water that didn't pretend to be anything else and a menu that pretended a little. You are very kind, she said. Practice, he replied, then flushed at the boldness, and both of them smiled because practice is an honest path to kindness if you keep walking. Her phone buzzed once. A document slid into view: audit schedule, outside firm, start date tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the terminal conference room, scope listed like a spine, training, reassignment protocol, complaint channels, signage, escalation paths, discipline history, corrective action logs. Her partner's note was 2 words: it's moving. She typed back one, good. She wanted to add, don't let them perform it, make them do it, but the audit firm they'd chosen knew the difference between choreography and culture. She closed the screen. The sea kept writing. Halfway through soup, a shadow fell across the table. The manager stood there holding something that looked suspiciously like humility, trying on a form it hadn't worn before. He had lost a little starch, life had entered him through the eyes. "May I?" he asked, indicating the opposite chair. She gestured to it, and he sat with caution, as if it might be trapped. He placed a single sheet on the table. "My statement," he said, voice quiet enough not to disturb the ship's piano. "The one I read. Signed." She scanned it, no hedges, no passive voice, the word discrimination present instead of the word misunderstanding, and slid it back. "Read it again tomorrow," she said. "Before boarding." He nodded, swallowed, looked out at the sea and then back at her. "I have a daughter," he said. "I hope someone teaches her building, too." She let the sentence stand. Some lines don't need reply to be answered. When he left, the folio woman took his place like a relay runner taking a baton. She didn't sit. "2 updates," she said, brisk. 1. Port Authority opened a file, they've requested your signed account and the recorded policy language. I've sent both. 2. We secured the independent hotline vendor, signs go up at all boarding points this week. QR codes, anonymous reporting, external mailbox. "Good," she said. "Add this, quarterly publication of incident counts and resolution times. Not just a hotline, sunlight." The folio's pen moved. "Done." Then softer, "You did well today." "I wrote a list," she said. "And made men read it." The folio smiled. "That's what well looks like." The ship leaned into a turn, glasses blinked with light, someone laughed 3 tables over with the relief laughter has after strain. She let herself watch the room as if she were a director checking the set, the host pouring water for a busser as if it were ordinary, the junior crewman showing the boy a map of the decks, the agent from the rope walking past the charter now pinned by the lounge entrance and pausing, really pausing, to read it as if she hadn't been the one to say a word against it earlier. Repentance is not performative, it looks like reading. Her phone hummed again. Media clips, the charter framed larger than faces, the mother's small public confession, the child's finger underlining a line. Comments scrolled, some ugly, most decent, a few indecently moving. She put the phone face down. She would not let the comments regulate her nervous system. The ocean had that job. A knock at her suite door later came like a courteous question. She opened it to the captain, impeccable white, braid shining like a doctrine, with the port officer at his shoulder and the compliance director 3 steps back. "May we?" the captain asked. She let them in. The captain looked around her suite in the way people in charge look around rooms, noting exits, weighing sight lines, measuring his voice against the upholstery. "I won't rehearse regret," he said. "We published it. I came to ask for permission to do something better." She raised an eyebrow. "I want to welcome you publicly at the gala tonight," he said, and affirmed the charter in the atrium. "Not your name, your public act. I want those who saw the wrong to witness the right repeating itself." She thought about the performance trap, about institutions that love ceremonies more than systems, about cameras that feast on faces and forget paper. "Only if the charter is on the screen behind you," she said, "and the hotline QR fills the second." The captain smiled, genuine. "Agreed." The compliance director added, "We'll have live captions." The port officer nodded, his nods had begun to carry the weight of promise. "Then I'll stand for that," she said. Hooks, celebration as syllabus, not as self-soothing. At the gala, under chandeliers pretending to be constellations, a string section sketched something everyone recognized and no one could name. The captain spoke briefly, plainly, not as host but as steward. "Today we corrected a boarding error that contradicted our charter. We've suspended the policy that allowed it and launched an external review. The charter is now posted by every rope. If you witness something that contradicts it, this," he pointed to the QR the size of a sail, "is where you tell the truth." People applauded. Not like at a concert, but like at a graduation where someone you love finally heard their name. He gestured then, and the spotlight eased off the charter and found her without assault. She did not step forward, she lifted a hand once, small, enough to accept respect without thirsting for it. Then she did something impolite to spectacle, she motioned to the mother in the sun hat and the junior crewman. The light split kindly. The mother touched her brim and smiled with the embarrassment honest people feel when decency is noticed. The crewman tried not to cry and failed by a millimeter. It did not ruin anything. After, guests did what guests do, came to say a sentence, to borrow some of the day's courage like a coat against a draft. A woman with a cane spoke about a different kind of rope at a different door years ago and how long it takes a body to stop flinching. A retired teacher pressed a note into her palm with a church handwriting that said, "I pray you never get tired." A man who had laughed at the rope earlier came to apologize and did it correctly, no weather, no excuses, only the phrase "I was wrong." She accepted the phrase the way one accepts bread from a neighbor, not because it will feed you, but because sharing food is how streets improve. Back in the suite, she took the note card with the day's date and wrote 3 more lines beneath it, bullet points the way her mind likes them when the adrenaline leaves. Paper first, always. Sequence beats volume. Post the charter where ropes live. Teach the building. People don't change when embarrassed, they change when responsible. She placed the card under the boarding pass and the signed refusal, a little archive in the making. The ship's horn sounded a long, low note that felt less like departure and more like consent. She turned off the overhead and let the room be lit only by water moving light up the wall. Sleep came the way honest endings do, not all at once, but steadily, as if it had read the audit schedule and approved. Morning would bring emails and calendars and the bureaucratic romance of follow-through. It would also bring sunlight on the charter by the rope and a boy who would drag his mother to read it again, just to see if the words stayed. They would. Paper had been taught to stand. Ropes had been taught to move. The sea, who had seen worse and better, kept practicing its one great lesson: repeat the right motion until the shore learns your name. The sea wrote its slow cursive against the hull all morning, as if annotating everything the building had promised the night before. Promises have a way of looking finished when spoken into microphones. The test arrives when schedules start and hands get busy. By dawn, the terminal conference room had turned into a small factory of consequences: badges at the door, sign-in sheets with time stamps, carts of boxed pastries that tasted like apology, and a screen already lit with the agenda that would turn yesterday's "we regret" into tomorrow's "we don't repeat." The external auditors began the way carpenters begin, by measuring. Sequence of events, the lead said, marker uncapped. Names, titles, times, the boring things that make truth too heavy to be moved without a dolly. The guest relations manager repeated his lines from the rope, this time with the passivity beaten out of his sentences. The agent who had said, "comfort," read her own words from the signed statement and did not look for soft landings. The junior crewman described the moment he chose to unclip the rope without waiting for permission and discovered he could carry his job better when he stopped dragging his fear. The auditors didn't perform judgment, they performed gravity. Hook, nothing looks more dramatic than a whiteboard when your future stands on it. By midday, the first fixes were out of future tense. Charter posters had been printed for every rope, in 4 languages and a font big enough for eyes that have seen enough. QR plates were mounted at a reach anyone could make without bending their dignity. The complaint channel went live, outside servers, outside inboxes, outside the temptation to tidy what should be plain. In the terminal. A family paused before a new sign and the father took a picture not for social media but for the way memory treats paper when it hurts and then heals. "It's real," he said, and meant the part that survives weekends. Training didn't wait for a consultant to bring a parade. The first session started in the crew mess at 1400 hours with a laptop, a projector, and a facilitator from a community partner who did not smile like a brand, she smiled like a neighbor. "Luxuries break when they're built on exclusion," she began. "We'll build yours on skill." They role-played the rope without the rope, the way you model a bridge before a storm. Associates practiced greeting the most ordinary version of a person as if there were no other kind. Managers practiced interrupting bias with sentences short enough to remember under pressure. Security practiced the choreography of de-escalation that starts with open hands and ends, if you're lucky, with an apology that costs no one their neck. Hook, the room leaned in because the work felt like work, not revival. The mother in the sun hat returned to the terminal to watch. She had not planned to, but people often return to the scene of a near cowardice to write themselves a different paragraph. The facilitator asked for a volunteer to play the guest. The mother raised her hand, voice trembling a little but steady enough to be a lesson. "I won't be silent this time," she said, and the room learned more from her sentence than from any slide. On board, the captain used the afternoon broadcast for something rarer than a weather update. "Ship-wide announcement," he said, voice modal and plain. "From today, reassignment by Comfort is suspended pending external review. Passenger rights are posted at access points. A dedicated, independent channel is available to report concerns. Our crew will train on these changes before every embarkation until further notice. We will be measured by behavior." He paused. "Thank you for teaching us with your patience when we did not deserve it." The crew went quiet at their stations. Passengers in deck chairs looked up from novels and saw the captain's face on a screen where cocktails usually live. Hooks multiply when leaders speak without armor. Afternoon brought something unsexy and crucial: dashboards. The compliance director and 2 analysts built a small portal that would do what promises hate: count. How many reassignments requested, how many denied, how many incidents, how long to resolution, how often bias surfaced at the edge of a euphemism. Numbers don't indict by themselves, they whisper until a person with a spine raises their volume. By 1600 hours, the portal sang its first low notes. The manager, the one whose jaw had memorized policy, asked to sit with the facilitator between sessions. He did not rehearse innocence, he asked about repair. "I can apologize until the carpet wears out," he said. "What tells my team this is not a season but a standard?" "Repetition," she said. "Ritual. And consequence when the ritual fails." He wrote the 3 words on a card and tucked it into his breast pocket the way people tuck family photos when they finally remember what they want to be seen carrying. Hook, redemption puts verbs in a person's hands, the audience can feel the texture of them. Near sunset, she walked the promenade because ships are really just long porches with water for a yard. Crew passed and nodded, some quick, some held, none performative. The junior crewman pointed discreetly at a small placard now fixed near the lounge entrance: "The charter, at eye height, right where line becomes room." "I check if it's still there every hour," he said, shy, proud. "I'll stop when I trust the walls." "Don't," she said. "Walls forget." He grinned. He would not forget. Her partner found her leaning against a rail, the kind of leaning a body does when it's returning borrowed strength. "The hotline's first calls came in," he said, 3 reports from other ports, 2 notes about yesterday's rope, 1 compliment for a crew member who intervened exactly right. "Frame the compliment," she said. "Teach with praise too." He nodded. He believes in carrots when sticks crowd the table. They wandered toward the bow. The string quartet was warming up for the second seating, the key higher tonight, the tempo less anxious. A small crowd gathered near the atrium where, by the charter, a new ritual had begun without anyone declaring it. At sail away each day, a crew lead read a single line from the policy aloud and a passenger, any passenger, read the same line back, not as call and response theater, but as a modest covenant between service and served. Today it was the boy in the sun hat, halting over a long word and then receiving, uncoached, 100 gentle prompts. He finished. The lounge applauded softly, the way you clap when someone ties their first shoe. Late, after the second reading of the captain's statement and a dinner where strangers insisted on picking up the check and she insisted back and they compromised on dessert, she returned to suite 1001 and added to her small archive. New card, same date, fresh ink. Build dashboards like lighthouses, numbers save more ships than speeches. Ritualize the right thing until it feels like furniture. Post the paper where the rope lives, read it where the room can hear. She slipped the card under the boarding pass and the signed refusal, a slender book beginning to form under her hand. She didn't name the book. Let future name it, present has chores. Just before sleep, a final message arrived from the compliance director: tomorrow 9 o'clock, manager reads apology at rope before boarding, trainee class at 10 o'clock, posters at every entrance, hotline posters posted, portal live, next week, publish Q2 metrics. She wrote back, put the metrics where customers can see them. 3 dots pulsed, then, yes. The ocean shifted its shoulder under the ship, and the ceiling delivered waters reflected light across the room in bars like a gentle jail she could walk out of whenever she wished. She turned off the lamp. In the dark, the ship was only a city that had learned to float. In the dark, the day's new rituals began repeating themselves in other throats, other hands, other rooms. That is how paper becomes practice, not with thunder, but with a schedule. And in the morning, the rope would meet the charter again, and again, and again, until forgetting cost more effort than remembering. By the third morning at sea the ship had learned a different rhythm, like a choir that finally found its key and now could sing without looking at the organist for mercy. Ropes met paper at opening without prompting. The apology read itself as if the words had grown legs. Training didn't wait for schedules to be convenient, it arrived like tide, regular and uninterested in excuses. That's how endings work when they're honest, they don't clap for themselves, they repeat until forgetting is more work than remembering. She woke before the announcements and sat at the desk with the tiny archive she had started: boarding pass, signed refusal, audit schedule, the note cards with their 3 daily lines. The sea, playing with light, projected stripes of water on the wall as if measuring the room for a new suit. Resolution is repetition, she wrote, and then smiled because repetition has a better reputation in hymns than in boardrooms. Still, hymns are policies set to melody. Her partner slid a note under the door: he respects thresholds like other people respect holidays. Numbers, it said. The portal had posted its first public board in the terminal: incidents logged, time to response, outcomes. Not a banner ad for virtue, just small boxes with facts that would embarrass liars faster than speeches would. The captain had approved the board beside the charter: same font, same height, same reach. You could watch couples stand and read while bags rolled past and understand that this, not the chandelier, was luxury's true test: can the room stand to see its own reflection at boarding time? She walked the long porch of Deck 10. Crew nodded with that new, not forced, cadence, as if respect had become the default and not the day's performance. The junior crewman showed her a photo on his phone: the mother in the sun hat and the boy reading yesterday's line of the charter into his camera and then teaching it to a grandmother on FaceTime. She cried, he said, shy proud. She said she's been waiting 50 years to hear a boat say that out loud. The best metrics arrive salty. At midday, the audit team finished its first pass through the policy rooms and returned with a simple list that hurt pleasantly: remove, at discretion, from reassignment, require dual sign-off for any seating change, create paper forms that insist on names, publish quarterly reports, read the charter at ropes, make the complaint channel louder than the lobby music. No poetry, just screws tightened where the hull had leaked. Denouement isn't a curtain call, the lead auditor said, dry. It's maintenance. They tested the new ritual at embarkation in the next port. The manager, jaws softer now that it had learned other uses, stood by the rope and read the same statement he had read at Sail Away, then stepped aside and let an assistant read it again, because succession is how change survives weekends. A grandmother stepped forward and asked, "Can I read the line about equal service?" She read it. People clapped the way people clap for children who tie shoes, because tying a shoe is a small kind of freedom and so is saying a rule where the rule is usually broken. Her partner joined her at the mezzanine rail. Legal sent draft language for a permanent policy revision, he said, handing over a page whose ink still smelled like decision. It struck the right tone: clean verbs, no passive voice, no ornamental adjectives that try to seduce judges. The policy moved comfort back where it belongs, to pillows and temperatures, and kept dignity on the boarding side of the rope. They'll vote it in at the next board meeting, he said. We'll be in the room, she said. Endings are votes written across calendars. Afternoon turned to that soft gold sailors pretend not to notice. The captain asked if she would say something at sunset, not about herself but about the charter. She stood by the rail where strangers become neighbors and spoke 12 words: a rule is a promise we can see before it is broken. Then she pointed to the board beside the charter, numbers glowing modestly. And this is how you know if we kept it. The ship didn't cheer. It breathed. Breathing is better than cheering, you can do it all day. Later, she returned to Suite 1001 and added her final card to the stack. Endings aren't events, they're schedules. Apologies don't endure, audits do. If the rope forgets, make the paper sing again. She slid the card beneath the boarding pass and felt the little book grow just enough to make the drawer heavier. She didn't keep it to prove anything, she kept it the way people keep birth certificates, not because they doubt the baby, but because the world sometimes does. Disembarkation day arrived with its usual choreography, suitcases like obedient dogs, elevators holding more strangers than they can politely count, announcements with the rhythm of airport prayers. At the rope, the agent, yes, the one with comfort, read the charter again without being told. Her voice didn't tremble. It had learned a note that holds. The mother and the son hat and the boy found them in the line and lifted their hands in that small half-wave that means family in public. The junior crewman pointed once at the board like a man showing off a new porch he helped build. Hook's resolve, the world looks same on the outside, the inside has moved. On the gangway, the port officer nodded a goodbye that had grown into respect. We'll keep the file open for a quarter, he said. Not for threat, so the habit forms. Habits are where justice hides between headlines, she said. He wrote that down. Officers who write down sentences live longer in their jobs. At the curb, the long black line and its quiet chrome waited. Her partner opened the door and, before she climbed in, she turned back for one last measure. The charter, the numbers, the rope behaving itself, a grandmother explaining words to a grandson, a manager whose face now did not flinch at paper, a crew that had learned to hold its shoulders like an oath. The ocean lifted the ship once, twice, as if to say, I remember you. Water remembers wakes. Good endings do. 2.